The Mercedes EQB. Anything with an E in front of it, you know is electric. Since we've already covered this platform before it went electric, a lot of this is carryover, almost all of it. I did like that vehicle for the fact that it was a little bit cheaper. It had the premium flair, but lacked an extraordinary price, and it is a very practical vehicle. This is for somebody that wants a Kia Soul EV, but has a little bit more budget, a lot more budget, because this pile starts at around $55,000 with a range of around 220 miles, and if you're in the cold like I am, it seems to take a massive hit in range. It's on an old 400 volt architecture, which means charging it is going to take longer, or quick charging is going to take longer. So it's like, again, we're taking an old platform, retrofitting it for EV, and then raising the price. That's what it's about. Now, if you're getting some type of tax credit, that might make this more palatable. But here's the things with the interior that you notice. It's quieter because you don't have a rattly-ass four-cylinder to deal with, and that's the biggest pro of this car. It still maintains a little bit of quietness on the interior. It is a well-isolated chamber. The visibility is really good. And in the second row, because believe it or not, you can opt for a third row in here. I don't know why you would do that, but in a second row, the seats do recline and they do go forward and backwards. So if you're getting this in the two-row configuration, it's much more practical than many vehicles, which means it's going to be easier to get a car seat in. It's going to be easier to get people in the back. And the hatch space is surprisingly good. So again, on the surface, everything looks shiny, bright. The ambient lighting, the screens, all that is pretty decent. But the counterpoint is all the technology is a generation behind. The processing power for the head unit is much slower. You still have all this BlackBerry swipe bullshit on the steering wheel. You have the old touchpad. So while it is a good space overall to commute in, there's still usability problems here. And that's where I'm going to leave it. If you want to know more, go back and watch my old video on this car before they turned it into an EV. Let's head into the shop briefly. We'll talk about the body. EQB. What is it?
It's the EV variant of the GLB. The GLB is $38,000 base. This is $54,000. So for the added luxury of having an EV drivetrain, you're spending a lot more money, like over $10,000 more.
Yeah, and what you're getting is you're getting non-adaptive dampers. You're getting a strut front suspension, a multi-link rear. You're getting a much smaller vehicle in terms of size, performance, and people are ragging on me about the Palisade video where I'm like, well, you're getting a lot for your money for $45,000.
This is the opposite of that.
Yeah, you're not getting a lot for your money here. What you're getting is a badge that has taken a vehicle that was internal combustion and modified it to be EV. You have an exterior that has been modified to be more slippery, and it is quite slippery.
Yeah, it's like a 0.28 drag coefficient.
Yeah. So it definitely does certain things better. You flatten out the underbody completely with the battery pack. But of course, side effect is you're adding a lot more weight here. But honestly, Jack, let's talk quickly about the battery before we drive. This is a, 67 kilowatt hour usable battery pack?
Yeah, it's a 70 total. It's 66.5. This is the EQB 300, which is the lower output variant. It's like 225 horsepower. Then you also get the EQB 350, which essentially has the same motors front and rear, but that puts out slightly more power. It's like high 200s. And the range drops from like 225 to lower 200. We're not working with a lot of range, or we're not working with a particularly large battery, but the one addition of having all of this battery weight in the center of the vehicle is more body rigidity and less NVH overall. That body rigidity helps reduce the NVH that makes its way into the cabin because it doesn't have all the drivetrain components that you're traditionally associated with a standard GLB. It's also much quieter on the inside. But it's time for us to take this for a quick drive.
Wait a sec, you forgot the fact that it's on the older 400 volt architecture, which I know somebody's just say, well, you don't need 800 volt because, that's just for fast charging and we don't need to do that. Well, you're buying a last generation battery pack and of course, system in that regard. So
in many ways, this is already outdated before it's...
No, it'll never be outdated, Jack.
All right, Mark, let's take this for a drive.
Driving around with f***ing Barney Bunghole over here. All he does is talk about his damn Corvette. I want to talk about my estrogen levels.
That has to be some of the fastest 225 horsepower I have ever experienced, Mark. In an SUV, at least. I mean, yes, it's not that fast, but it's still pretty quick feeling. What do you think?
I don't give a This thing is a piece of shit. They take a car that I already like.
Yeah.
I like this thing.
The GLB.
GLB, it's fine. Like I said in the interior segment, you know who it's for. That doesn't make it bad, but then you make this thing $60,000 and you get half-ass range. The cold has affected it so much. Like I started this morning with like 190 miles of range and I'm down to 86 and I've barely done anything with it. I'm gonna have to put it on a fast charger to get home. It's a gimmick. Who is this for? That's what I want to hear it from you. Who is this for? While I'm enjoying my peppermint cone.
This is for the man or woman who lives on one of the coasts, who an idea of a long drive is 20 miles. Their whole commute is maybe 10 miles, and they want the refinement of the EV drivetrain in this package. While I don't agree with that, that's who this is for, right? Because compared to the standard GLB, this is much quieter. This EV variant, this EQB, is very, very quiet. Albeit it's very heavy, but when we drove past a semi earlier today, Mark, and you could barely hear it as it blew past you.
I'm trying to break up the constipation I had from all that stuffing I ate on Thanksgiving.
So you don't like it?
Let me put it this way. I am sick and tired of driving these $60,000 piles that I could literally just get in and forget that I'm in it. I could give a shit less. You essentially have a small mortgage payment for a fucking car that is completely disposable. There are good things about it, obviously, this architecture. But this thing feels, honestly.
No, it feels like a $30,000 car.
It feels, no, you're being a little bit.
$40,000.
35. It does. It feels like this thing should be $35,000 for what it is. And yeah, they tarred it up, you know, all the shit on the inside, the ambient lighting and the screens. Oh, wow, the screens, Jack, it's amazing. I don't have wireless Android Auto in here. I don't have cooled seats. I don't have a lot of shit for $60,000, and it makes me wonder why I don't have any of that stuff in a premium product that I get in cars that are half its price. So I'm left with a car that is absolutely f***ing boring to drive, and I'm paying a lot of money for it. It's quiet, I guess, kind of quiet.
It's very quiet.
Okay.
It's very quiet, and if you live in a country where you can no longer get a gas, f***ing possum, you can no longer get a internal combustion car, you're taxed up the ass. That's who this is for. This clearly isn't for Midwesterners. This isn't for someone who has to drive a long distance. This isn't for someone where they can get a standard GLB for way less money. This is for someone who is stuck in some compliance market, and that's why they have this thing. Because you're right. On no planet would I take this over the standard GLB 250, which is every bit as nice on the inside as this, for $20,000 more money. Because I agree with you in that regards. But with that, Mark, before we get banned for life from Mercedes, let's head into the final thoughts.
We didn't talk about the ride quality. We didn't talk about anything.
The ride quality isn't all that great, Mark. It's really heavy. And over big bumps, it does a good job, but over little bumps, it does a horrible job.
What about the EV drivetrain? How's that tuned? It's all-wheel drive. It's got to be good.
What do you think, Mark? You've spent more time with it than me.
I don't know. I forgot. Every time I drive this, I forget what I'm doing. This is my point, right? Every time I get in this, I want to do everything else but drive it. I got my water bottle in here. I got two empty cups of coffee. I have an ice cream cone. I'm trying to figure out ways to distract myself from being behind the wheel of this car. And again, at $60,000 for what this thing offers, I don't care if it's EV or not, and the range that it is, it's just a completely forgettable, disposable car on every single metric.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, Mark. So let's head in the final thoughts.
final thoughts on the Mercedes EQB. Now, clearly, if you've watched this entire video, you'll know the enthusiasm level is rather low. And that's not because, in many ways, that the car doesn't work. It didn't do what they set out to do with it, that they didn't meet their engineering challenges of retrofitting battery packs and electric motors into a car that was designed for an internal combustion. It's just the end result is way too much money for what it is. The sacrifices of doing that, like having still a transmission tunnel that intrudes on the driver and passenger space, still having a hump on the floor where the exhaust would run in a normal car, it's just not worth the money that they're asking for it. Now, this is a difficult part because in our current climate of modern cars, there's many countries that are dictating that we go to a certain extent to have all electrification by a certain point in time. But my argument is that in some ways, I don't think manufacturers are ready to do this. And what you're doing by the EQB is a perfect example. You're creating a throwaway car, and they're not gonna make a cajillion of these things, but you're literally creating a throwaway device that has zero relevance in like 10 years down the road. This thing is just gonna wind up being a garbage can on wheels. And it's not because, like I said, there's anything wrong with it, but there's nothing right with it either. It's a transitional product that really should not exist, other than trying to build up to the next car. So how many disposable products do you have to make before you get to a place where you have a complete conversion process? And that's where I'm gonna leave it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.